How was this even allowed? The story of West Caribbean Airways Flight 708. The sun had barely risen when an eager young journalist, Amelia Wells, sat at her desk, staring at a grainy photo of an aircraft. West Caribbean Airways Flight 708. A forgotten tragedy, it seemed, swallowed by the sands of time. Yet the story gripped her. How could such a catastrophe have occurred? And more importantly, how was it allowed? The year was 2005. The McDonnell Douglas MD-82 aircraft departed from Panama City en route to Martinique. On the surface, it was an ordinary flight, carrying 160 people, most of them vacationers returning home. But beneath the surface lay a brewing storm of neglect, greed, and human error. Amelia's editor had tasked her with uncovering the layers of this tragedy. It wasn't just about the crash. It was about the moral collapse that led to it. She began her research by speaking with aviation experts. The consensus was chilling. The aircraft was woefully under-maintained. West Caribbean Airways, a struggling airline, had cut corners to stay afloat. Maintenance records were incomplete. Pilots were overworked. And the MD-82, a machine that demanded meticulous care, was flying on a prayer. Amelia discovered transcripts from the cockpit voice recorder, painting a picture of mounting despair. Captain David Munoz and First Officer Enrique Soto had faced a cascade of challenges that morning. Shortly after takeoff, the plane entered a thunderstorm, encountering severe turbulence. The aircraft struggled to maintain altitude, and both engines began to lose power. The pilots fought valiantly, but their training, limited by the airline's cost-cutting measures, failed them. Instead of climbing out of the storm, they inadvertently slowed the plane, leading to an aerodynamic stall. In those final moments, the pilots' voices betrayed a mix of confusion, fear, and frustration. They had been set up to fail, not by the storm but by the system. The human toll was staggering. Among the passengers were newlyweds returning from their honeymoon, a grandmother eagerly anticipating her granddaughter's birthday, and children clutching stuffed animals. These were people with dreams, plans, and lives ahead of them. Amelia found herself haunted by their stories. One mother, who lost her husband and 3 children in the crash, had written a book about grief and resilience. In an interview she said, "It wasn't just an accident. It was negligence. How could they allow this?" Amelia's investigation led her to the heart of the issue: corporate greed. West Caribbean Airways was teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. To stay competitive, the airline had slashed budgets, overlooked safety protocols, and pushed its employees to the limit. Regulatory bodies tasked with oversight had turned a blind eye. Inspections were cursory at best, and fines for violations were mere slaps on the wrist. Amelia uncovered documents showing that warnings from whistleblowers, engineers and pilots, had been ignored. As Amelia pieced together the story, she realized it wasn't just about West Caribbean Airways. It was about a global culture that often prioritizes profit over people. The crash of Flight 708 was a glaring example of what happens when ethics take a backseat to expediency. Amelia decided to frame her article as a moral tale, a call to action. She wanted readers to see the humanity behind the headlines, to feel the weight of decisions made in boardrooms far removed from the lives they affect. Her story began with a vivid retelling of the crash, placing readers in the cockpit as the pilots struggled to save their plane. She then delved into the systemic failures that led to the tragedy, highlighting the warning signs that had been ignored. Finally, she ended with a plea for change. How was this even allowed? The answer lies in our collective apathy. If we don't demand accountability, if we don't prioritize safety over profits, then tragedies like Flight 708 will continue to happen. We owe it to the victims to do better. Amelia's article went viral, sparking outrage and calls for reform. Governments around the world pledged to tighten aviation regulations. Airlines faced increased scrutiny, and whistleblowers were encouraged to come forward. For Amelia, the story was a turning point. She realized the power of storytelling to inspire change. More than that, she understood the moral responsibility that came with it. The crash of West Caribbean Airways Flight 708 wasn't just a tragedy. It was a lesson. It taught the world that cutting corners comes at a cost, that lives are more valuable than profits, and that silence in the face of wrongdoing is complicity. Amelia's story became a rallying cry for accountability, reminding everyone that safety isn't just a luxury, it's a right. And in the end, it wasn't just about how the crash was allowed to happen. It was about ensuring it never happened again.